Hi guys, it's good to be talking to you again. This time we're talking about GDP. So what is this mysterious thing, GDP? Well, it's the market value of final goods and services produced within New Zealand, and that's usually it's either in a quarter or over a year. GDP can be measured in three ways. So three measurement approaches, and they all get the same result. Alright, so what we've got is the expenditure approach, and as economists this is the one that we use most often because it aligns with our thinking about management of macroeconomic variables like investment. Then we've got the income approach, and we've got the production approach. These two are always equal, because if you want to produce anything, then you've got to pay your workers. If you don't pay your workers, then you don't produce anything. And this one ends up equaling the other two through inventory being a balancing item. Alright, well look, let's get into the detail of the one that we're going to be working with, the most, which is the calculating GDP using the expenditure approach. So what we can do is that say y equals GDP equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Now, when we're doing national income accounting, we will refer to GDP, gross domestic product. That's what I forgot to tell you, is it's gross domestic product is the full name for GDP. Sorry if you're wondering. And when we get into modelling, for instance, using the aggregate demand and aggregate supply diagram, we use Y to symbol the GDP, and we'll sometimes refer to Y as being equal to national income. Because remember, when we're calculating GDP, expenditure equals income. So that's why we can do a bit of a flip-flop. Alright, so what's this one here? Well, this one here is a household consumption spending. So just going and doing grocery shopping is an example of C. Every time you go to Pick and Save, you're undertaking household consumption spending. This one here is investment spending. It's by business and government. So, for instance, every time a new house is constructed, I will go up. This one here is the government's spending. Government spending, buying final goods and services. For instance, healthcare, free healthcare, or free education, like primary school education, is an example of government spending. And these two are pretty self-explanatory. This one here is exports, and this one here is imports. We don't use I. I is reserved for investment. And when we bracket these two, we talk about net exports. Now, sometimes net exports can be a negative value, or it can be a positive value. Oops, that doesn't look very positive to me, Kim. Right, so I'll just change that. Let's go plus 3. Right. For instance, exports is export revenue. How's that made up? Well, that's price times quantity. M is import costs. How is that made up? That's price times quantity. We could get into a discussion of elasticities, but I'm not going to do that. Now, you may be wondering, well, why do we take imports off? Remember, imports represent the production of other economies. They don't represent our production. And I can quickly demonstrate that. Look, here's little old, that's the North Island of New Zealand, believe it or not. There it is there. And over here we produce a car body. Over here we produce an engine block, so that goes in there. And here we imported some tyres from Malaysia or China, and then we fit those tyres to the vehicle, and we say, didn't we do well? We produced one truck. Well, no, we didn't. We only produced the car body, and we only produced the engine block. The tyres that were fitted to the vehicle belong to the production of another economy. So we don't want to get into double counting production. So that's why we take off imports. And remember, there's an element of imports in consumption spending, in investment spending, and in government spending. Look, the other day I was at Pack and Save, and I bought some imported South African peaches. Import spending. All right, okay, leaving that one alone. Now let's get down to the user end. Now what we can do is that we can work out our rate of economic growth. Now generally, if economic growth is going up, it means that our material well-being is going up. So how can we calculate that? Well, look, it's just the real GDP at T2 minus the real GDP at T1 divided by the real GDP at T1 times 100%. So it's a percentage growth rate in real GDP, isn't it? It's like the change in GDP over the base GDP. Now, in New Zealand, we're having a good year if this thing is increasing by about 2 to 3% per annum. The way to visualise that is that if we put down here consumer goods, put here capital goods, here's the frontier, and we've got some economic growth in our economy. It means that frontier is moving out. How's that? All right. Can't stop there though. There's more. All right. So now what I want to do is I want to get into the per capita calculations. So we're getting down into the use end of GDP, per capita calculations. So per capita just means per head of population. All right, so let's just take the first one. If I've got a nominal GDP, and if I divide it by the population, then sure, I'm going to get nominal GDP per capita. Okay, now how can I think about this? You know, well, what you can do is you can think about it as being the average. That represents the average income per person in New Zealand. That's on paper. So what you can do is you can go and calculate the nominal GDP per capita for each of the regions, can't you? So per region, if you like. And then you can work out which region potentially offers you the greatest salary or wage or income. That's something that I'd want to work out if I was thinking, where do I want to go and work? All right. well, let's do the other per capita calculation, and this one here is going to be, of course, real GDP divided by the population. That's going to give me real GDP per capita. And how can you think of this? You can think of this as being the average purchasing power per person. Right, okay. Of the two that we've just discussed, which is the nominal GDP per capita and the real GDP per capita, which one do I want to know is increasing? It's this one here, isn't it? It's the real GDP per capita. Look, if the real GDP per capita works out to be, say, 27,000, oops, let me just be a little bit tidier. If the real GDP per capita works out to be 27,000 per person, then what we're saying is that this person here has the ability to buy $27,000 worth of real goods and services. So over a period of time, if this goes up, then you're going to be really pleased, aren't you? Because you can buy $3,000 more real goods and services. Well, I think that I'm probably going to just leave it. There's just a couple of more things I need to talk about, alert you to. So if you go into Statistics New Zealand, they'll identify the chain ratio series, and that means that they're talking about real GDP. I think that the series is 2009-10. All right, and again, if you go into Stats New Zealand and you're looking at the GDP spreadsheets, and they talk about current prices, you'll know that they're talking about nominal GDP. So when you go in and look at that primary data, remember there's no degrees of separation between you and John Key. That's exactly what John Key does when that stuff is released. He goes in and has a look because he's got the ability to analyse it and interpret it. And that's what I'm trying to equip with you with. There's the ability to interpret what the numbers are saying. One of the first things he'll do, he'll just check to see whether he's looking at a spreadsheet that's dealing with nominal GDP, or whether he's dealing with a spreadsheet that's dealing with real GDP. Okay, well look, that's definitely it from me on this catch-up.